Welcome to part one of painting our Jaguar. I have transferred my drawing to a 10 by 13 sheet of beige velour paper using black carbon paper and a 9B graphite pencil. After carefully doing that, I'm now redrawing the image to make sure all my lines are visible. I'm also locating the spots, but I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on them in this phase because we're going to do them over again several times as we go along. If you would like more information on the transfer process, we have several videos on the website for free in the video section that show you how I do this and some other helpful tips. I'm getting the feel of what my cat looks like by taking the time to add some of these details with my pencil. Now the graphite pencil can be covered over with the pastel, so we don't have to worry about it taking up any tooth. I'm using my white charcoal pencil now to add a few white hairs in the ear. The white charcoal pencil is very useful for doing this in the early stages. By adding the hairs here, they will show through the subsequent layers of pastel that we're going to add, and I'll be able to use this pencil again to help finish up some details. So this is important to the mapping process. Any place you want to save and keep it white, use this pencil. But keep in mind that the lines you put in are not going to go away. So use a light hand. I keep my hand at an angle to the paper. It's not 90 degrees. I'm keeping it kind of laying down, maybe a 25 to 30 degree angle to put in these hairs. Now I'm adding a few hairs in the other ear, on the left side of our cat. Now I want to mention also, I could have used a light gray paper, but I this time decided to use a warm beige paper that complements our cat. So I'm adding some other white areas around the face of the cat, around his mouth, that are going to help me to find specific lines later on and will show through the other layers of pastel. Now I'm going to use my 6B charcoal pencil, and I'm going to draw in the dark shapes. These also will show through other layers of pastel, as we want to know where these shapes are. I'm going to begin marking the spots now with my charcoal pencil. By marking them with the charcoal pencil, they're going to show through our base coat layers of our Jaguar. And we'll be marking them again to make them darker. But for now, we're going to do it with the 6B charcoal pencil. This photo reference is courtesy Paul Fine. If you would like a copy of it, please look at his website and purchase one from him if you would like to see the reference photo. It is copyrighted, so I am not free to show that in this video. But you can get one from him. I'm being careful of where I place the spots, and I'm just kind of really scribbling them in, but I'm making sure they're nice and dark. I don't want to lose them So I'm putting enough charcoal on the paper for them to show through. Now I'm going to outline my eyes with the charcoal pencil, being very careful to shape the eye carefully. I'm working down the side of the nose. Taking my time. Please take your time with this. These are important preliminary steps. And darkening the nostril. And his mouth. This is the shape of his body, back of his leg. So I'm going to put that in. It's going to not be as prominent in the painting as the face. But we want to put it in and get those spots in. Now I'm kind of indicating the logs that form a platform that the Jaguar is laying on. I'll go into those in more depth as we proceed, but now I'm just kind of outlining them. I'm continuing on to outline the paws and where the claws are, putting in those marks so I can find them later. This is a bit of a complicated area. The pads of his paws are visible. They're in shadow, but we're going to add those. I'm adding more details to the paw. Just taking my time. I'm going to add some little spots on the side of his face. His face is kind of wrinkled up because it's laying on his paw. I'm going to speed this up a little bit. I'm just adding a few more spots with my charcoal pencil. I'm going to slow back down to real time while I draw in the eye very carefully. charcoal pencil is very much like the white charcoal pencil. You want to make sure your lines are accurate because they're hard to remove. I'm getting the shape of his eye. Being very careful about that. And his lower lid. And getting that pupil in. I'm going to speed this up a little bit while I put in these spots on the leopard. So we'll go a little bit faster to get them all in. Now I'm shading the inside of the ear. As you can see, the white charcoal pencil hairs show up right through the black pastel that I've added. We're back in real time now, and I'm just using the side of my pencil to place that dark area in the ear. I'm going to speed this up now while I add the remaining spots on the paw of the leopard. Now I've added a piece of glassine paper to rest my hand on while I continue to add spots to the leopard's face. I don't want to get my hand in the work that I've already done. So the glassine paper protects my painting. It doesn't allow the pastel to stick to it. I'm going to speed up the addition of spots a little bit now. I've increased the speed a little bit while I continue to add these spots across the cat's forehead. We marked where they were going to go when we transferred the design. I didn't have you spend a lot of time with it with the pencil because I knew we were going to come back and mark them with the charcoal. Just be careful in your placement and make sure they're dark enough. The 6B charcoal is a soft pastel pencil and allows you to put in some pretty heavy spots. So take advantage of that. Don't put too much, but thoroughly cover the spot area. And I'm also where it needs to be, making it look rounder. You can see I'm kind of rounding those out as I go along. Now I've slowed things back down into real time and I'm moving around the ear to add the spots there in that area. Now I've sped this up a little bit and we're going to finish adding all the rest of the spots to the top of the Jaguar's head and to the back of his neck and behind his ears. And then we'll go to the next step and start layering in our colors. I'm starting the base coat on the Jaguar now. I'm using 704.7 light gray and gently cross-hatching, avoiding the eyes and the nose all over the Jaguar. This is going to be our foundation coat. We're going to apply light layers until we build it up to just the right point that we want. Now I'm going to apply the second base coat layer with 411.5 burnt sienna. I'm going to gently cross hatch this all over, but this time I'm going to avoid any areas of white fur, such as around the mouth, the bottoms of the paws. I'm also avoiding the eyes. So I'm just cross hatching it back and forth. I'm doing this with a half stick of pastel. These are Rembrandts. I'm going to cut them in half and sand the bottom edge until it's smooth and wipe the dust off, and that's what I'm using to cross hatch with. I can also turn it up on its end and use the end to get into the smaller areas that I want to add color to. When the bottom of the stick, the wider area, is too big, I can use that end. So here you can see I'm adding it to the upper part of the paws, but the lower part is white, so we don't want to put it there. The next color I'm going to add is 231.5 Rembrandt, which is gold ochre. Notice how the black spots show through all these colors, and also the white hairs that we put in previously. So I'm using that up on its end so I can get into those smaller areas. So this is building a nice, rich, colorful coat on our animal. Using the gold ochre over the burnt sienna helps to even out the color and blend the two together, producing a rich, warm brown, which is what we want as the base coat for our Jaguar. Now we need to add some richer browns to our Jaguar, and we're going to do this with several different colors. The one I'm starting with is 263 Indian Red. So I'm beginning to add the darker colors in the shadow areas of the Jaguar. This is a new pastel. This is a beautiful deep brown with a lot of red in it. So I'm going to add the shadow in the corner of the eye and across the top of the bridge of the nose. I'm just gently applying color and shading it like you would color in a coloring book. I am holding my stick kind of at an angle to the paper so that I'm using the whole side of the point. I'm taking my time as I move around the Jaguar's face, shading his nose and the side of his cheek. Underneath that left eye. Take your time when you're doing this. You're just gently applying color, and by deepening the values, we're going to produce a roundness to his face and give a three-dimensional quality. Here I'm moving into his ears. We want his ears to look like they come off of his head and not pasted down on it. So we need to add some color in this area. And see, the white hairs are showing through the color that we add. So I'm moving my glassine to keep my hand on top of it and adding the Indian red onto his left ear as well. I'm using Indian red to gently color over the back part of the Jaguar's body that's going to be kind of out of focus and fade into the background. Now I'm working on his paw, adding some shadow there with the Indian red. Now I'm changing colors. This is 353 cordovan. It is a darker color. It is more of a Mars violet, kind of a gray type of brown, and it's taking our shadows even deeper. This is also a new pastel. I'm carefully adding darker color. I'm working in the ears now. Be sure and watch the introductory videos that come with this course to show you how to sharpen your pastels to a nice point like this. Going back to the Indian red now, adding color behind the ear on the top of the Jaguar's head. Switching back to the cordovan, I'm going to darken around his eyes. We're slowly building color. Here I'm using 259 dark gray to add color to the nose. We're going to work on the nose now. So I'm using the gray to add a shadow right at the base of the nose where it connects with the nostril area. And I'm putting some shadows underneath the nose as well, down onto the area that will become white. I'm also adding some shadow on the side of the Jaguar with the gray. And the inside of the Jaguar's ears. They're going to get quite dark on the inside. I'm going to darken the corner of the Jaguar's eyes, and I'm also going to use the gray to base coat the bottom rims of his eyes. I'm going to continue using this dark gray to add the shadows between his paws and to shade the area that's going to become white. So we're going to put the shadows in with the dark gray. And we'll be adding white hairs on top of that. I'm going to base coat the Jaguar's nose with 416 dark rose. This is just the perfect pink color to use here. I'm also going to use it to color the pads on his paws. Now I'm going to use Indian red to shade the pads on his toes, on his paws, to create that shadow up at the top where it meets the animal's paw. And now I'm using 353 cordovan to shade the pad. I'm going to make it a little darker with the 259 dark gray. I'm using the dark gray to add a little bit of shadow to the nose. And now I'm using the Indian red to deepen the color on the nose. Here I'm using the 286 Matter Pink to add highlights on the Jaguar's nose. I'm also using it to add a little bit of a highlight on the pads of the Jaguar's feet. Now we're going to do the Jaguar's eyes. So I've zoomed in so you can see better. I'm outlining his eyes with 305 spruce blue. We're going to put this underneath the black that's going to go around his eyes because it just makes for a more lively black if we add a little blue. So I'm coloring that rim with a dark blue and the corner of his eye. Now after I've put the blue on, I'm going to go over it with 229 black, new pastel. So this is going to make for a very vibrant black. I'm outlining around his iris. And in the corner of his eye. Now I'm going to use my white charcoal pencil to put a highlight on that rim. See how pretty that is. I'm using a sharpened 211 white new pastel to add a bright light to the bottom of that rim. Now I'm using 305 new pastel spruce blue to darken the nostril of the Jaguar, the same way we darkened around the Jaguar's eye. I'm going to use it down on his mouth as well. Now I'm going over the areas where I added the blue with the 229 black. Here I'm using my charcoal pencil to just deepen the area at a little darker value in between the nose and on top of the nose. I'm also adding black in between, down around the mouth area over the blue that we added previously. Now let's do the left eye. So I'm using my spruce blue to outline my eye, and then I'll go over that with the 229 black. So I'm going over all the areas that were blue with the black new pastel. I'm also outlining that rim. I'm coloring the rim with dark gray 259. And then I'm using a little bit of white new pastel to highlight the rim. Here I'm base coating the tip of the ear, which is also black. So I'm adding 305 spruce blue before I add my 229 black. Cover it now with the black, 229, new pastel black. I'm adding color at the top of the ear in between the black areas with 411.5 Rembrandt. And now I'm removing my glassine piece and I'm going to darken some other areas. So I'm using the spruce blue to add some dark areas to this side of the cat that are going to be black later on. This is going to be a very dark area. So I'm putting the blue in to get that a little darker. Now I'm putting black over the areas where I applied the blue. Here I'm using the 259 dark gray to add a shadow to the Jaguar's face on the right side. I'm just lightly going over it. And I'm darkening this little area of shadow with the 229 black. I'm using the 229 black to add some shadows to the paw. I'm going over the areas where I previously put the 259 gray to deepen those areas between his toes that are darker. I'm also using the black to create the shadow that the fur casts on the pad of the Jaguar's feet. I'm also using the black to add some spots that happen to be in that area as well. I'm using the 229 to darken the interior of the Jaguar's ear. So I'm just gently feathering that darker color out from the very center to the outside edges of the ear. We started to darken it. We started adding color with the gray, and now we're going over it with the black. I'm using the dark gray to darken down the area of the cat's body that's going to be pushed into the background area. It's going to be kind of out of focus. We want to separate the jaguar's head from the body, so I'm going to start making that value a little darker and a little grayer with the dark gray new pastel 259. So I'm putting that all over the body at this point. Here I'm using the 229 black to make the values a little bit darker. Particularly around the muzzle of the cat. Putting in spots that are on the back part of the cat's body. I'm adding a few shadows too. Let's paint the Jaguar's eyes. First, we're going to base coat the eyes with 308 Palm Green. I'm just gently coloring this in. Getting a nice even coat of pastel on both eyes. Now I'm using my 298 bottle green to add darker color right around the pupil area of the jaguar's eyes. I'm using my 229 black to firm up the pupil so you can see it a little better. And I'm also using it to add a shadow from the top lid. And I'm using a little 259 gray on top of that as well to kind of darken it down. And underneath the rim of the bottom of the eye. Let's do the same thing. We're going to use the 259 to darken the shadow of that eye and a little 229 black over that. Finish up that eye with a little 263. Here I'm using 233 raw sienna to add a highlight in the jaguar's eyes on both sides, in both eyes, just down right at the bottom. Then to brighten it up a little bit, I'm going to use 348 Endive for a brighter highlight. Just kind of makes his eyes glow. Just a little more raw sienna right down at the very bottom of the eye. A little bit of 263 as well. Just adding a little more color and stroking the raw sienna up towards the pupil. On the left eye, I'm adding a little more color to the iris. And you can just kind of work back and forth with the colors till you get the balance that you want. I'm using my 211 white new pastel to add a highlight in the left eye, a bright highlight, and I'm using it in the right eye as well. A little more endive. Well, our eyes look great. Be sure and join me for part 2 of this video workshop coming up next.